Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we'll get back in there right now. All right. He's David Morsuti. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. This is CFL Talk, where we talk about the Canadian Football League, and sometimes we talk about the NFL as well, when it's interesting enough to talk about. But one thing's for sure, we talk about football. And so far this season, things have been rolling along. We've been thinking, well, this is not boring, but it's humming along. The league's humming along. Nothing really big happening, except for people complaining about the Argos on the road, about the rule changes and all that stuff. And smack dab in one weekend, in one game, in one half, in one quarter, it seemed we had everything change, and it changed in Hamilton with probably the prospective MOP of this very season going down, along with a previous MOP, Bo Levi Mitchell, firstly, and of course, Zach Caleros, secondly. That has to be the biggest story of the week.
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, to lose, you lose your starting quarterback. Let's talk about Hamilton first, with Bo Levi Mitchell suffering a pretty horrific injury. And then they come out and say that they basically don't have they didn't put a timeline on the recovery for the injury. They didn't say he's out for the year. They just said he's had surgery and this and that. So yeah, Hamilton right now, they're trying very hard not to overreact to what is a pretty devastating situation, because they were all in on Bo Levi Mitchell. Like, they brought in Trey Ford, but they didn't bring in Trey Ford thinking he was going to be stepping in for Bo Levi Mitchell.
Not right now, anyway. Not right now.
No, maybe they were going to develop him a little bit, see if there's something there, give him some time to, evaluate his skill set. The evaluation's happening. Well, actually, hate to say it, you think the evaluation would happen right away, but it's not, because he's not even going to get the start in the next game. It's going to be Jake Dolegala, because Trey Ford comes in, and no offense to Trey Ford, but he looked like he was swimming with sharks. He looked like he was out of his depth, which is very disappointing, because yes, I get it. He's the backup, but he's a backup quarterback who's been a starter in this league. He's a backup quarterback who has played quite a few reps in this league. He shouldn't have had. I understand that you come in, it's a new organization and it's a tough situation, but he came in there and he did not look like a CFL quarterback.
Yeah, and that's true, and not to make excuses for the kid, for the young player, but the fact is, I think he was as in much shock as everybody else was with the injury, and I think I think he just wasn't ready for the moment, and I really believe that's why Dolegala is going to start. Ford, as we saw last year, no, sorry, the year before, when BC got their quarterback back, O'Rourke. He came from the NFL. He didn't look like the same guy. And you know how I feel about that situation. I felt that the NFL and the experience in the NFL really ripped his confidence, and ripped it enough that it took a while for him to get it back. In fact, I think we're still, just this past week, we've seen Rourke be who we think he can be. And Ford, I think, has the same issue. This is a guy who was handed the keys to Edmonton. He was the future quarterback for that team. Not just future, the present quarterback and the future quarterback. And they paid him in kind. And the disappointment that season must have become for him, I can't get in his head, but I can assume it was a disappointing experience last year. I think now he has a confidence issue that he needs to rebuild. Sports is very emotional. Yogi Bear always joked about it. It's 50% mental, or 50% physical, 90% mental. It is a tough sport. Football is. Being quarterback, you're a key player. That's a lot of pressure, David. And to understand how hard it is not to grasp it and to control it is not a surprise to me.
No, and look, like I'm not going to sit here and say I would be doing a better job, but part of the evaluation for a quarterback, as you're kind of saying, um, is you need to show that you're capable mentally of handling the job too, right? It's not just the physical traits. You need to have that, as you said it, you need to have that confidence, the mentality to go out there and lead, to prevent a ship from sinking when it's taking on water, to navigate pressure when things aren't going right. It's funny. I don't like giving this guy any credit, but Tom Brady, I'm going to bring an NFL reference into
Oh
this.
boy.
Okay. Just because it's an easy one for me. He is not the most gifted athlete in the world. We think we can all agree on that.
He never was. Why he was
Never
drafted
was.
so low?
He was drafted poorly because he did not measure well with his physical traits. But what did he do? I think a lot better than a lot of quarterbacks. And he's not the only quarterback, but I'm putting him in there because he's the most notable. And because for this conversation, it works. He's got the mentality. If something's not going right, now sometimes you're not going to 100% be able to overcome it. But for the most part, Tom Brady knew which buttons to push, when to make certain changes, when to read the game, and when to do what needed to be done to make his team win. That's something that not every quarterback has. There are quarterbacks in this league that do have it. Like there's people say, Zach Claros, his time is done. Why do Winnipeg keep trying it? Why is he still playing? Because physically, yes, he's got his problems. He's got his injuries, but he still has that mentality. He still has that mentality that he can go out there and lead his team to a win. And Winnipeg will take that over the unknown. Unfortunately, Winnipeg's not going to have much of a choice going into this week, just like Hamilton is not going to have much of a choice. But that to me is what separates the good quarterbacks from the great quarterbacks. The great quarterbacks, I'll put Davis Alexander in this situation. His mentality is exactly why he thrives in this league. Yes, injuries are a problem for him, but mentally, he knows how to attack the game. He knows how to lead his team in the right direction. He's got that mentality, right? It's something that, even Nathan Rourke has had to work on it. Nathan Rourke is finally, the last few years, I think him going to the NFL, yeah, he didn't make a team. He didn't see a lot of significant playing time. But you got to see how those guys worked. He got to see what made those guys successful, and he was able to apply it to his game. Cody Fajardo, what does Cody Fajardo get another chance? He might, again, he's not the most gifted quarterback, but Frank, you and I both saw it when he was in Montreal in that Grey Cup. The mentality he had. Now, was it a bit of a conjured up narrative? A little bit, yeah. But he knew people were doubting us. I'm going to use that as fuel. And he won because of that. Nick Arbuckle, not the most gifted passer. Nobody thought he had a chance against Winnipeg as the starter going into that Grey Cup. He led his team to a win. Now, he had a lot of help to get that done. I do give him that. But again, it's all about having your mentality, your mental game come together with the physical part of it.
Unfortunately, without the confidence to succeed, successes can be elusive. And, your Tom Brady example is a good one, simply because he never was given credit for being athletic, or, he always had a strong arm. I don't think anybody doubted that he had the arm. But the point is, the tools you have are irrelevant if your brain can't process what needs to be done, simply because there's more to the game than your physical attributes. And every year we look at a league, we look at a sport, and there's always those guys that have no business playing. Take like Ronaldo in soccer, right? 41 years old. What's he doing out there? Why is he playing? Because he can, because he has the mentality and the physical aptitude to play. But we underestimate for quarterbacks how much of their game is mental. Their leadership is required. They have to be quick, literally on their feet, and they have to have confidence in the ability that they have. And I'm hoping Ford finds it. He's been a guy that you and I have. I I, I don't mind admitting I have been a guy who's been hopeful that he would have a successful career. I don't take his failures personally, but I feel them. I feel his failures because of how good he is and how athletic he is. He doesn't have the greatest arm in the world, but I don't know if there's a player that's faster than him in the Canadian Football League. And that begs the issue, and why he'll keep getting chances is because he has the physical aptitude, and people are thinking maybe today's the day where he understands what he needs to do. Essentially, that's all that's wrong with him right now, is he just doesn't understand what he needs to do. I know that sounds silly because they have tons of coaches telling them all the time what to do, but it's we all know, everybody out there, you all know that you go into a situation when you add pressure to yourself, you know the difference. Everybody knows the difference, that under pressure, things change, and you need to be better, and you need to know you can do well. And it can be hard. Pressure is a real, killer. It really destroys the opportunity to be successful for all of us. So I don't know how that'll change for him. It needs to change. Does he have a head coach that could help him to be a better quarterback? I think we both agree on that. Milanovic has a long history of working well with quarterbacks. Dinwiddie's out in Ottawa. I can see him becoming the next Dinwiddie tool if he doesn't work out, in Hamilton. So this is something, the quarterback, every year we talk about it, and every year we're given various examples of why it's true. And now we're going to live out, right now, you and I and every other Canadian Football League fan is going to live out how important a quarterback like Bo Levi Mitchell is to his team, the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
Yeah, there's a reason why they put all their faith in Bo Levi Mitchell. I mean, I thought it was a great opportunity for Trey Ford to get into a new organization, get the tutelage under a veteran quarterback like Bo Levi Mitchell, to get a coach like Scott Milanovic to work with him. I'm not saying it's over for him. I just wonder, he's already been cast aside as the second. It's been maybe he was seen as the number 2. Now he's not seen as the number 2, because you would think with Bo Levi Mitchell out, it would be Trey Ford getting the next opportunity, but it's not. And like Dolagala, don't get me wrong, I think that there is reasoning behind it. I just look at it as they're gonna have to really work. I don't know how big the leash is going to be. Let's just say I don't know how the big leash is going to be for him, and it is not going to be pretty. If Jake Dolagala struggles, it's not going to be pretty, because then a lot of people are going to say, "Well, why didn't Trey Ford start?" And then if Trey Ford gets to start and it doesn't look good, you know who the third option is going to be, Frank? Mr. Daggy or Doge. Daggy?
Daggy, yeah.
I always can't remember if we ever cleared
Daggy
that
and
up.
Dolagala come from the same place.
But it's crazy when you look at how many quarterbacks are trying to get opportunities, and in the CFL, it kind of feels like guys are kind of thrown together. But it also just reminds you that they also try to find guys with a lot of the same attributes. But so Jake Dolagala said that Bo Levi Mitchell told him just to be himself. We're both gunslingers. So it's clear they want to use Dolagala's ability to throw the ball. That's going to be tested. If you're Saskatchewan, You know that's going to be the number one thing. Make him throw, throw, throw. Go ahead, try to throw the ball. That's what I would be doing.
The one thing that I think has the change over the last 10 years, well, it's been a few years since there's been so many really good quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League. And the one common thread is that a lot of them are older. You know, Fajardo, like we talked about, of course, uh, Bo Levi Mitchell, Zach Caleros. You've got young guys. Well, he's not young anymore. I don't know if you can call Kelly young, but Kelly, Alexander, um, Rourke are the guys the past few years that have shown that they can play big league football, and they're unusual. They're kind of rare. Vernon Adams is a guy who's I consider in between those two different groups of players. But where Vernon Adams, since we're talking about quarterbacks, where Vernon Adams has, you know, he hasn't proven himself over the long haul, which is why he is where he is now in Calgary. Now, it looks to me like he has the best chance to have a really good, solid season. You know, when he was in BC, David, he was on his way to being an MOP, and then things just derailed, right? And to be a CFL quarterback, the best CFL quarterbacks, and I believe this to be really true. Whether you talk about Ricky Ray, whether you talk any quarterback that's had a lot of success in the Canadian Football League, has been a quarterback that stems the failure. They have a bad game and they don't follow up with a bad game. That's the toughest thing about being a CFL quarterback, is to have the ability to be consistent. And I think this year we have the most consistent quarterbacks we've had in years. We had two of them we lost all of a sudden. And then, of course, you know, you have Fajardo. We've seen quarterbacks that are being, you know, traded around. We've seen that with Harris, who won a Grey Cup, you know, so there's a lot of really good quarterbacks out there. And it seemed like this was going to be the year where we weren't gonna point at more than one team that didn't have a quarterback. But now we got concerns with more, and we're back to where we were before, where there's a handful of teams that are going to be out of the running because they don't have a guy that can lead them.
Well, exactly, right? So, you know, the Bo Levi Mitchell, that was a freak injury. You're not going to see that happen every time. But again, it just reminds CFL teams how vulnerable things can be. Look at now Winnipeg. The guy you thought would start in place of Klaus, he ever got hurt, isn't even the guy that's going to be starting.
Same thing that happened in Hamilton. It's the same story.
Yeah.
You've got a very deep pool of guys you're willing to try, but there's no guarantee. There's a lot of guys that have experience as CFL quarterbacks that have failed elsewhere, and they haven't been able to grab the gauntlet.
Mm-hmm. Like, it's kind of crazy that Drew Brown has been away for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
2 years been away from Winnipeg. He's there for 1 week and is starting. Now, I understand some of these guys. There is some familiarity within the organization, but it's not entirely the same.
No, he doesn't have the same guy calling the plays.
No. So this is going to be a
experience.
This is going to be an interesting one. You know, like if you're Toronto, you have seen Drew Brown put up some big performances against you, but you've also seen Chad Kelly negate that by his ability to put up a lot of points and a lot of big games. But I think the one thing that Winnipeg feels it has going for itself is its defense. That was the only reason why they won against Hamilton. Like Gearsma, I give him credit. You know, he steered the ship. Did he do an? I think, you know, obviously considering the situation, they're probably expecting a little bit more. but he at least kept them in it. He kept them going, and it must be tough. It's a tough thing for him to not get right back in there to show what he can do with a week's worth of prep as the starter. But I mean, you do have to feel for him because he probably was hoping that he was going to get that chance. But look, they made the trade for Drew Brown. They gave up, it wasn't nothing that they gave up for him. It was clear. It was clear. It's interesting because they even traded for him before Claros got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did they? There was probably an opportunity for them to go and get a Drew Brown, and they felt, okay, let's go ahead and let's do it. But I wonder if they're in their mind there was something there potentially.
Well, I think Winnipeg, above any other team, had the situation of not having a backup quarterback you could go to. Nobody experienced it more personally than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the Grey Cup 2 years ago when they didn't have somebody to send out there instead of Zach Collaros. And the Argos won the Grey Cup simply because their defense could say, challenge him. He's got a finger. There's something wrong with him. Let's make him throw the ball. And they did, and it ended up being a good thing. So, I think Winnipeg's aware that it's time for them, if not to go and transition to another quarterback, be prepared for the moment that they can hear knocking. And we all can hear it not. Father Time is always wins. It's not a question of if, it's just a matter of when. And they can hear the footsteps, and I think Zach can hear the footsteps too. I wish him all the best. I wish he has a great year. He comes back. There's nothing I've enjoyed more than watching him and the success that he's had since he was a young man. It's fantastic. But reality is reality. And Winnipeg cannot afford to be in the position where they lose a quarterback. And now look, that's what Hamilton's thinking. And who doesn't know more than Toronto how good it is if you have a guy who's capable of being a backup? How important is a capable backup? We know here in Toronto, covering the Argos, how important it is to have a capable backup.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's why Nick Arbuckle's still around. People probably thought, oh, maybe they don't bring back Nick Arbuckle to maybe save some money to not pay. Because you're not paying Nick Arbuckle chump change. No Nick Arbuckle is going to need more than that. And so now you're going to hope, right, that if you're Winnipeg, that this move pays off, because the West is not hard. The West is not easy. The West is hard. You can't afford to. Now they're 2-2. They're not in a terrible spot, and you don't know how long this injury to Collaros is, but you cannot afford. Like, Winnipeg's been fortunate that they haven't missed out on the playoffs because of an injury to Collaros yet.
Yeah, that's something that they got to hope for. Well, listen, I think we've talked. If there's anything else we can say about quarterbacks, it's that Rourke had a good week. And Adams, of course, this will be a segue, had a great week against Toronto. 6 touchdown passes, 1 on foot. Had a great game against the Toronto Argonauts. Calgary started slow this season, but it seems that they're starting to find their rhythm. I don't know, David, how much of that game was Toronto not being good and Calgary being great?
I mean, look, they were aggressive. Calgary was super aggressive in that game. They knew Toronto had a good run defense. Toronto's run defense has been very good. But guess what? Their pass, they've been very vulnerable to the pass. They have struggled to cover. So Calgary, Toronto Calgary's been the boogeyman to Toronto. They know how to exploit. That's what Calgary does best. Give Dave Dickinson a lot of credit. He knows how to exploit a team's weakness. And so in this game, they noticed that the Toronto cornerbacks were struggling with coverage. They were struggling with coverage. Guys were getting open, and DBs then started to be overly aggressive because the mentality. And I talked to Ralph Hawley. I spoke to Benji Franklin this week. I forgot to bring my camera, so I didn't get video of it, unfortunately. But their mentality has always been to play complementary football, meaning we got a great quarterback in Chad Kelly. We need to get him the ball. So what are you going to do? You're gonna try to force turnovers. In order to force turnovers, you got to play a bit aggressive. And Toronto got guilty of that. They got there's times where they didn't cover properly on the route, or they tried to jump the route and it went against them. And they learned a lesson. Whether they'll take that lesson and move forward with it, that's something to watch out for.
Well, their jumping routes and their defensive style, I think, might have shown a little disrespect for Vernon Adams, and Vernon Adams didn't make any mistakes this week. And I think that's the real important thing here, where Vernon Adams had the kind of game he's more than capable of. That is being perfect and making the big play. Well, he made a lot of big plays in this game, and I agree with you that some of the big plays didn't need to be big plays from an Argo perspective, where if they would have been a little bit more conservative, things wouldn't have happened, like the return, the interception for a touchdown. The list goes on and on. The point being, I agree with you with the aggressiveness of the Argos, that it's a two-edged sword. It can kill you as much as it can make you great. But I think also the one thing that I feel about their quarterback, I think Kelly is still, he's still a guy. He's a gunslinger, right? He still needs to sharpen his game. I think his game's a little bit dull. He's making passes that I think he knows he shouldn't. And looking back, and when we saw him in the post game, David, I don't think I've ever seen him so admissive, and he wasn't defensive about it. He was just he accepted his responsibility, and he didn't seem defensive about it, which tells me that he really understands that he's got to make some changes, because he can tend to be a little bit defensive when he talks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way he responds, he was really, I'm going to say, almost say he was demure in his explanation of his game and how it could be better and it should be better. It was just simple. I really didn't play well. I need to play better. And it wasn't an angry version. He was very just simply, I think he understands it, and maybe now he'll have an opportunity to be a little less, like you said, a little less aggressive. Not just the defense, he as well. The team, the coach Miller told us after he was hired, when we were the first ones to ask him questions after he was hired, that was what he said. I want to be aggressive. Well, we all knew that being aggressive could become a problem if you're not aggressive in a controlled way. I know that's counterintuitive, but essentially that's what we're talking about, isn't it? We're talking about being aggressive, but in a controlled way.
You have to be smart. You can't be trying things that are reckless. You have to be smart about it. And look, that's what Vernon Adams did. Vernon Adams is very aggressive, but guess what? He gave what Toronto gave him. He didn't try to manufacture plays. They were there for him for the taking, so that's what he did. And so, Kelly has been doing that, but he's also been put under pressure. I don't think the team may disagree with this statement, but when your defense is struggling to stop teams, the pressure's on the offense to say, we got to get at least 30 guys. Yes, I know that this Argos team loves to score points, but they shouldn't have to score 35 plus points to win a game every week.
That's the issue.
And that's a problem. And look, guess what? They have been scoring 35 plus points, right? I think the only game they really had to struggle was against Montreal. That's the only game where
you can't allow 58.
You can't. Yeah, like that one there. That was disappointing because I thought Toronto still had an opportunity. The Calgary one, they decided going into that second half, they just didn't have it. They didn't have it. And so, if I'm Toronto, this Winnipeg game, discipline is key. You need to be disciplined. That defensive line is so experienced, so potent, so dangerous. They have a good second. They have a good defense all around. You know how good that defense can be.
Absolutely.
Offensively, they don't want their offense to have to score 40 points. Now, they have the potential to, but guess what? They're going to have a situation where they might need their offense to score a little bit more because guess what Toronto's defense is all about? It's all about scoring. But they're going to want Toronto to make mistakes. Plain and simple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what they have to do. You know, as far as the Argos is concerned, they've got a lesson to learn. We've heard and we've heard the talk. Now the team is talking about, the coach and others talking about it. They're treating this road warrior thing because they're playing so many road games. They're treating it as an opportunity to be tight as a team, to get to gel, right? But I do think they also need to be successful. As important as it is to gel, the road is great. But as far as winning is concerned, being the home team is part of that formula of winning. And not being at home, that percentage of advantage that you have playing at home can make a difference. And I think that Calgary game is a perfect example where the team plays well, and then the crowd becomes a factor. So we'll see what happens. They've got a couple more games, 3-4, 4-3. If they could get there, if they can win the next two games, then their season's going. They have a very good chance of being fine. Because I really believe that once they get home and they start having home cooking and the fans are behind them, a 3-4 record won't be hard to overcome, as far as I'm concerned. In a season that now has Hamilton without a starting quarterback, at least one that we know can play, and also the fact that Winnipeg doesn't have a starting quarterback, and Ottawa hasn't played well. Two things come to mind. The crossover becomes more difficult for the West, and finishing fourth may not be an issue in Toronto in the East. So they just have to play good football. And I think you're right. They're going to have to play a little more conservative. They're going to, like you said, they're going to have to be smarter about it. They've got to be also a little more patient. Patience is something that in football comes in handy. Their run game looks better than it did last year, David. The Argo run game looks better, but it also looked like the old run game for a while in that game. So there's still, I like Hicks. I think Hicks is a great running back. The guy turns, plays that might not be worth much into something, which is important for the running game.
Yeah, it is. It's very is very crucial for the run game. I think there's going to be a situation where eventually at some point that has to be, it's not going to be the feature of their offense. It's never really going to when you have Chad Kelly as your quarterback. But you want to give these guys some rhythm. I mean, look, give Coach Kadeem Carey a lot of credit. He's got them working as with what they've gotten in terms of opportunities. They're doing a great job with that. But here's the caveat to all this. All right, it's good. I've really appreciated that they have given the run game more
featured it more.
It hasn't been neglected, but with Chad Kelly struggling, not struggling, with Chad Kelly having a lot of turnovers, I would like to see the run game be used in ways that it's going to be less predictable, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does make sense. What you're talking about is when you're running from a position of strength. In other words, if your running game is going to get you 5-6 yards, if it's going to give you that, then the defense has to be honest. And to be honest means that, he's going to have less, Kelly's going to have less to worry about downfield. But if the run game isn't keeping the other team's run defense honest, that means they can concentrate on the pass. And really in football, and I'm not claiming to be an expert here, but the run game is what sets up the pass. If the run game isn't working off the hop, then the pass isn't going to work either. You need to have the run game work. To your point, the Argos have to figure out how to make it work. They're going to have to make sure and take advantage of anything that helps Hicks be successful. And once that is a danger, then the pass game becomes a danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's why a lot of teams have found success. They've found success in a lot of ways. But I do think that there has to be there has to be more of a plan in place for these running backs to get those chances. Like, but in the past, it was about giving them chances to really, take advantage late in the game or in certain moments. I just think that maybe I'm speaking of a bit of a broken record, but I do think there's opportunities for them to have more of a footnote in this offense.
Yeah, and they should. From the Calgary perspective, this is a team that for the past couple of years has made strides in becoming a great competitor in this. I mean, they are a Grey Cup contender the way they played the last week. The first couple of weeks, not so much. Last year, the way they started the year, they were Grey Cup competitors. And then they had a terrible finish, which they continued at the beginning of this year. Now they're back to playing the way they did at the beginning of last year. And I think they're real. They're as real as Adams makes them. That's the one thing that I have to say. Adams has to shed a bit of his reputation. And each time he has a game like he did against the Argos, it'll be another time where we say, maybe this is where he's going to pick up where he was in BC and take it all the way to the house, take it all the way home. And that's where Calgary is, in my opinion. They've got a dependable defense. They've got a dependable special teams. And to your point about quarterbacks, one of the things quarterbacks can do, and that is manage the game. We've had a lot of successful teams who haven't had quarterbacks that were dominant, but they managed the game. In other words, they didn't do anything to lose the game. What they did was they played really well, scored enough points, and gave the defense an opportunity to succeed, which means don't put the defense on their heels. So it's not just about being successful and getting touchdowns. It's about field position. And field position is very important in football. Special teams gives it to the offense. Defense gives it to the offense. But you know what? The offense gives it to the both of them as well. And that's what we have to remember when we talk about football. It's a three-phase sport, and each of those phases has a lot of relevance. One of them can take the team out. Two of them can put the team in a chance to win, with the other one not being too much of a negative. And that's what can happen with the quarterbacks. The quarterback doesn't have to be the greatest quarterback ever, but they can't lose the game. That's what they can't do. They've got to be at least a touchdown or a field goal or something better than the other team. That's what they got to be. And how they get there is what's important. How they get there. There is no designated way to do it. It isn't 40 points. It isn't 30 points. It isn't a defense holding a team to 2 touchdowns or a touchdown. It's a combination of all that stuff. That's why it's a team sport. And right now, Calgary with Adams has such a great advantage because of the way he's playing. The Argos with Kelly, a bit of a disadvantage with the interceptions.
Yeah. No, it's the thing. The defense talks about playing complementary football by getting the offense the ball. The offense needs to play complementary football in that they're not going to put the defense in a negative position either.
Absolutely. 100% true. Let's go to the second game. And this was a game between Saskatchewan and Ottawa. In Ottawa, Saskatchewan won 27-22. This was a game that Ottawa looked respectable, but a loss is a loss. And the problem with Ottawa is because they historically have lost so many games, the definition of losing for them becomes figuring out how they can lose another game. And unfortunately, this game, David, fits in that category. They figured out another way to lose a football game that they could very well have won.
Yeah. No, it's very well. No, very well. A lot of teams when they're close games, there's a lot of what ifs. What could have been, right? In Ottawa's case, it's tough. It is so tough because they hitched their wagon right to Jake Mayer. Jake Mayer was the guy. They're gonna hitch their wagon to him, and it's not like he has been terrible, but he isn't doing enough, right? Like you look at this team, I want to look red zone opportunities. They were 2 for 4 in the red zone. What does that mean? They had 4 opportunities in the red zone to get 6 points, and out of the mathing, David, do the math. 24 points out of a potential 24 points they could have gotten in the red zone. I'm not including the field goals, the extra point in that. They got 12. So what does that tell you? They left 12 points on the board. Well, how many points did you lose by? You lost by 5. You lost by a touchdown. Because and this is something that was a thing in Toronto too, where you took your opportunities to put up touchdowns. They were field goals. Now, I'm not saying that was the only reason why they lost. They lost because I thought the defense played pretty well. They kept them in the game, obviously. But at the end of the day, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Statistically, the quarterbacks were discernibly different. They weren't that different. You look at the stats, 259 yards, average of 8.6 yards, 243 for Saskatchewan, 7.8 yards. I'm looking at the stats here, and it was to your point, it was a few of the things they didn't do, which I think were very frustrating for the coach. I've never seen Ryan Dinwiddie in the years that he was with the Argos. I've never seen him as angry and frustrated that he's been with Ottawa. The pressure on him clearly is very heavy, and and he became very vociferous in his displeasure with his team. I hope that he figures things out, because Ottawa's fan base deserves a little better than they're getting, and the Ottawa fan base is very disappointed. Right now, the GM's under review in the same amount of games. He's lost more games than the previous GM did before he was fired. So, there's a lot of facts that basically speak to change in Ottawa. And David, you and I both know in sports, the more a team changes, the longer it takes to recover and become a good team.
Yeah. For sure. No, it's very true. Like you're I think people have to understand, especially in Ottawa's case, you do need. I know they expected this to be a instant success. Toronto wasn't dominating right off the hop with Ryan Dinwiddie. There were growing pains. There's gonna be growing pains all the time, right? I just wonder how much patience. How much patience does Ryan Dinwiddie have? Because he's used to winning. He's used to being in Grey Cups. Last year was the first year that he ever went through a season like that, and you could tell it was getting to him. How much patience is he going to have this year?
That's $1 million question. What we can say as well is that Saskatchewan is Saskatchewan. If you don't play well as a team, the 3 phases don't play well, they can kill you with 1 phase. So, they didn't become a Grey Cup champ because they're a one-trick pony. And Ottawa, unfortunately, didn't get enough done to beat Saskatchewan, and especially at a time when I think Saskatchewan, confidence wise, and also their running game is not as strong as it can be if they're totally healthy. So Saskatchewan's prone to losses. They really are, and this game, I'm not saying they were lucky to win because they're a great team and they deserve to win. But David, if they're playing a better team than Ottawa, they would have lost this game and they would have had another loss to explain.
Yeah. And you look at the calendar this week, okay? They go right they go from Saskatchewan to Edmonton. They go against the two top teams and the two top records in this league. So you have maybe in a little way a bit of a built-in excuse,
Which
you're Ottawa. But you're right now you are 0-4. You go to 0-5. I don't know. Like, to me, the offense has not looked good enough. Like, that was the thing. Okay, your defense might struggle, but the offense is the worst offense. It's the second worst offense in the league, and the only worst offense is Winnipeg, who A are 2-2, and B lost their starting quarterback in the last game. Like, Ottawa can't say, "Oh, we got an injury, and this is why we're struggling." No, they don't have that excuse. And now, as you said, they got Edmonton this week. Okay, if they lose that one, guess who they got next? Winnipeg. Who do they got after that? Well, no, they don't have anyone because they're on a bye. Then they got Montreal. There's no break in the schedule for Ottawa. There's no easy. I think we've established there is no gimme game in the CFL really anymore. Gone, I think, are the days of Edmonton being the kind of the, I hate to put this word out there, but gone is the automatic win that is going up against Edmonton. Ottawa right now looks more like the automatic win more than Edmonton does.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. With Edmonton and BC playing, well, we finally saw the team we thought BC could be. The owner's box was looking a little better, concerned, but a little better than it has in the past few games. They played like we expect them to play. A great defense, special teams, okay. But the offense and their quarterback, their receivers, they have a lot of really good receivers, and they came through with their passing game, and Rourke looked really, really good, David.
Yeah, I mean, hey, guys, Nathan Rourke, pretty good at quarterback. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that the guy who was MVP last year? Like, this is not a 1-3 football team. This is, I know your record is what your record is.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, Nathan Rourke didn't have a perfect game. I'll give him credit. James Butler.
Oh, my goodness.
What a game.
The running game. We talk about the running game. The running game. Saskatchewan looks different without their running back.
Yep. And Nathan Rourke threw a couple of interceptions, but don't worry. The defense had his back. Because Fajardo, look at him, 400 yards. He had to throw the ball 51 times because guess what BC did? Justin Rankin, your running back, not beating us. Not beating us. He had 19 yards, Frank.
I know.
15 yards came from run one. So he had one carry for 15 yards, 6 carries. The rest of the 6 carries, 4 yards.
Yeah, he seemed invincible since the beginning of the year.
Yes.
In fact, I think it's fair to say that he was the main reason why they were a successful team up until this game.
And BC knew that, and BC attacked that. Now, BC, yes, they kept the running game, especially Fajardo, because Fajardo likes to run too. That wasn't happening. They kept the rushing yards down, but the passing yards, almost 400 yards. Got to tidy that up a little bit. like I know they were up a bit, but they got to tidy up the secondary a little bit. But 3 interceptions, like they knew you give the ball, put the ball in Cody Fitzgerald is a good quarterback, but he's a better quarterback when he doesn't have to throw the ball that much. When he's not being asked to throw the ball 50 times in the game, he's a much better quarterback.
Absolutely.
And BC, like I talked about Ottawa and their struggles in the red zone. BC 4 for 5 in the red zone.
Absolutely.
Because it helps when you're running game is that good. And James Butler 2 touchdowns, and Horvath had another touchdown.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we'll close it out with talking about the last week's games with Winnipeg and Hamilton. We already talked about it pretty good. We talked about the quarterbacks. We talked about Winnipeg. I guess the final thing I'll say about Hamilton is I'm waiting to see how the fans react to this. This is an organization that has not had a good century. They've had a lot of hard luck in a lot of different ways. But they've got the people that can turn this around. They've got some good leadership on defense. If they can get some quarterback play, which they didn't get because their quarterback got hurt, this team will be okay. And I feel the same way about Winnipeg, David.
Yeah. I do too. I do feel the same way about, like, the quarterback situation is going to be very curious. For me, it's going to be more so about I'm not as concerned about Winnipeg because they have that defense that'll keep them in line. It's the offense. If that offense has another performance like that, oh boy.
And guess who they're playing? They're playing the Argos. And if they can't force some errors, sack the quarterback, hurt the run game that the Argos have to offer, that game could be very dangerous for Winnipeg. Toronto has an opportunity here to explode a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And then Ottawa and Hamilton, this is an opportunity for Ottawa to have a winnable game.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's that one. And then we've got what I think is the best game of the weekend, Montreal and Calgary, 2 teams that are playing at their best, and they're going to meet each other.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure.
And it'll be interesting how Vernon Adams plays. Former Alouette, an organization that knows him and knows how to get to him and knows the effect getting to him has.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree on that. I'm very curious to see how this could be a week where everything that you think can happen will happen, or we're going to be so wrong about what's happening.
Well, there's a lot of questionable teams because of circumstances. Quarterbacks missing, teams play well, then they don't play well. The inconsistency, like Edmonton has. Ottawa, we're waiting for them to get off the schneid. And it'd be nice to see them get off the schneid. This is something, we had a chance to get to know Ryan Dinwiddie, and I have nothing but all the respect in the world with him. Very approachable as a coach. Doesn't have any problem with talking to you, regardless of the team winning or losing. But I do agree with you that the losing is having an effect on him. So we hope for him. I hope for him there. But I really sharpened view. I want to see how real Calgary and Montreal are. That's the game. I'm going to repeat it again. That's the game I'm really interested in watching. It is going to be interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, David, any final comments about the Canadian Football League this week?
No, we'll see.
Not a comment about the rules or anything like that.
What rules? There's no rules.
I have one because in the BC game they played in a stadium which is like Montreal, and the corners were cut off. So as far as I'm concerned, there's another reason why you shrink the field. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That's it. All right, he's David Morisuti. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi. I really appreciate you folks being here. Hope to see you again next time. Of course, we're back here again Friday morning. The show drops on Friday morning. We talk about what happens on Thursday night. So hope you enjoyed the program. We look forward to seeing you again. David, as usual, thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, sir.
And he writes articles about the CFL in Sportsnet as well. Thank you.